So we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup. I have the great pleasure to introduce today Dana Mantilia, who is the founder and CEO of Identity Protection Planning. Dana, thank you very much for joining the show up today. Much
Thank you for
appreciated.
having me. Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
So it's always funny when I interview people that actually host podcasts and so on because they're so well kind of versed with the being on the other side, not so much being the one that answer the question. So, but welcome, thank you very much for joining. And the purpose of this conversation, which is completely unscripted, is to get a feel of who you are, your background, why did you decide to create a new business, what gaps do you see that currently exist in security awareness training, and then we'll kind of go from there. So, as a starting point, Dana, how did you get started? This is not your first rodeo. You're an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, right?
Yes, I have definitely had a few businesses before in my past. How I got involved in this whole little world came through the identity theft protection world. We had clients that we wanted to offer identity theft protection to. We couldn't really find a product that was B2B that we could then offer to C. So got together with a software team out in California, put together a product, and then we launched that. It's called Identron. And then after that, I realized how much education really, really needs to be done out there for against cyber criminals, identity thieves, and scammers in general. And thought, well, how could we combat this? Whatever we're doing now is not working. The problem's only getting worse. So I decided to do my little short videos. So that's kind of how I got into this whole thing, was through putting the videos that I do on LinkedIn. And when I started them, I was a little intimidated. This is such a serious topic, cybersecurity, and my videos are not serious. They are very short, very spoken in layman's terms. I try to add a little humor sometimes if I can, and just want people to walk away with hopefully remembering a very specific message. And if they ever wind up in one of these scenarios where they're like, that seems a little fishy there, and I remember that lady on LinkedIn talking about that, that's what I want to do. So that's how I got started in this whole thing.
And I love this. I find the most successful businesses out there are just like you mentioned. You came across a need, and at the time there wasn't anything that was out there, and you decided to create your own. But it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's creating a business. It's not easy. It's acquiring new clients, and sometimes you don't know where the kind of the money, the payroll will come from. What do you recall, like the first few clients, and how you came about to actually solidifying, from an idea that's kind of vague to something that people want to go out and pay for?
hmm Well, I found it to be even more intimidating than doing the videos because I'm not a technical person either. And most of the training that has gone on in cybersecurity so far is created by the IT department. And so now I have to, not only am I new to this, establish myself, but then I also have to say, and by the way, I don't know anything about, the IT that goes on with all this stuff. I only know about how to talk to the people to cut through that. So that was really hard in the beginning. It takes a while to establish some credibility, right? That's what you have to do, and get a couple of customers to initially trust you. The other thing that was an issue is a lot of people wanted me to travel around the country to go speak to their employees, and I really couldn't do that before COVID. I just didn't have the time to do that. So that was another problem I was running into. And then luckily, one of the good things that came out of COVID was that now we're living in a Zoom world, and I can do a lot of the training virtually for small organizations, big organizations. So that's been a big game changer. So we all had to kind of pivot in during the COVID world, and this helped me kind of shift directions a bit.
What's amazing about what you just mentioned specifically is that you took advantage of the fact that you were non-technical.
Mhm.
And I mean, you were fearful at first, but you took advantage of that and then actually spun it around. And the videos you're creating, you have a fresh set of eyes because you come from a quote unquote non-technical background. You were on the receiving ends of these threats, basically. Allows you to create videos that in training that's appealing to a non-technical crowd, which is, I think, it's one of the kind of the biggest gaps out there. As you mentioned, there are a lot of trainings that are being created for technical people, and not so much for non-technical people. Um, so from your perspective, like the first few areas that you decided to tackle from a cybersecurity awareness training, do you remember what those were?
Well, I think that if every company just started with the basics. There's a lot of companies that aren't even doing the basics. And what I mean by that is having an employee code of conduct so that everybody knows what is and what is not, you know, kind of assumed that people are going to be doing, not doing kind of thing, just so new hires, regular people that have been there a long time, if something was to happen, let's just say there was a quote unquote incident, cyber incident, and you don't have everybody on the same page as far as what your message is going to be, you're going to have people on social media, on Twitter, hey, I'm at work, we're getting hacked right now. You're going to have people calling their relatives, emailing everybody, and you don't want that. But how can you expect anybody to do anything differently if you've never told them, should we ever have some kind of an incident, here's our communication plan within our organization, here's our communication plan outside our organization. But even password policies, I mean, there's such basic stuff. And one thing that I always try to do with any kind of training is I'm a big believer, if you train people and help them learn how to help their families, their home, themselves, their older parents, there's more buy-in because you're giving them a lot more added value when you're teaching them something about, hey, make sure your parents know that if you get a phone call and there's someone saying it's the grandchild, or whatever, that kind of scam, that's not real. Because when that scam, it's such an emotional scam that if people aren't warned about it beforehand, most of them do fall for it. So anyway, the moral of my story is saying if you can help people to learn how to protect themselves, especially with these smart devices, things in their house, then they're getting the buy-in. They want to learn about it because it's going to help them on a personal level, as well as, when they're in the workplace. And I think that's something that a lot of the training has not only been too technical that people really can't understand it. There's a lot of fear. They're just trying to put fear in. Don't click on this or you're going to get fired. Don't do this or you're going to get fired. And I don't think people are really very responsive to that kind of.
Yeah, totally. And it seems like some of the cybersecurity awareness, traditional ones at least, were fear based. Like, if you click on this, fail 3 times, you're out of here, kind of thing. And you're laughing because it's true. But what's interesting about that is that phishing emails are so hard to detect. Even the cybersecurity professionals that do that for a living sometimes get caught. So it's not like oh yeah, you got caught. It's just tough for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned going down to the basic and coming down to the basics. In your opinion, why, we're not doing the basic stuff? If it's so basic, why are these companies still don't have, like, 2FA or basically security controls? What's stopping, companies from just getting their shit together?
Well, I think what is stopping them is that almost all of them say it's not going to happen to us. This isn't going to happen around here. We don't have anything of any value. Nobody's going to bother wasting their time getting into our system or trying to get into our system. And that's exactly wrong, because guess who else knows that? The hackers know that. So they know you're not doing anything. So they know this is the best way to go in there. And these ransomware attacks that are going on all over the place, if you're a smaller company, they know that. So they'll set your ransom at, say, $50,000, which may be a tremendous amount of money for you. But if you had to get your information back, you could possibly come up with $50,000. They're not going to say to you, here, you got to give us $20 million. And then you're like, well, that's impossible. I can't come up with that. So they know they post the ransom relative to your size organization. And that's one thing that everybody needs to really start thinking about is it's not a matter of, oh, it's not going to happen around here. It's a matter of when is it going to happen around here. And most of the companies that do wind up getting either a data breach or ransomware attack, they go out of business. A lot of them say, well, what do we do now? Well, I don't know. It's good luck at this point, but there's a lot of, damage you got to try to recover. And do you pay the ransom? Do you not pay the ransom? So I don't know, but I think the first thing everybody needs to realize is that we have to start taking this seriously. We really do. And, a lot of companies, the owners don't want to invest any of the budget for cybersecurity. So there's not a lot of that. They say, well, I'll deal with it if something happens.
Yeah, totally. And you're right. Everybody's a target, and we're knowledge-based economy. I mentioned it a couple of times, and it's even if you think that you're not necessarily a target, you are a target. And even a brick and mortar like a restaurant, the IP that was kind of researched and refined over many years. For example, how do you walk in a customer, what type of recipes, and so on. That's an IP that somebody may or may not want to steal. So even though you're not like a traditional target, you are a target. So tell me, kind of, it seems like it's something that everybody needs, security awareness training. But, are people really knocking on your door to get these services? I mean, it just seems like some of them are reluctant to spend the money on security awareness training. And again, thinking that potentially they're not a target. what do you do to get new clients, and what is kind of the best client for you? The people that are like, okay, that bought into it. Do you deal with the CEO directly, the CFO, because some of these companies don't not really have even security folks that are maybe that you have an IT manager but not necessarily security. So I know it's a couple questions in one.
Well, I think depending upon the size of the organization, and to be honest, there are a lot of companies, like I mentioned, that don't want to do this. Most of my clients have actually reached out to me through LinkedIn. That's mainly how I've gotten into contact with a lot of these folks that do want to do some kind of training. And I think that I would. This is the advice I would give to anybody in cybersecurity right now. Is this is going to be a long road, but I think what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that something catastrophic is going to happen, and then those companies are going to go out of business, and then the ones that are left standing are going to run around and say, oh my goodness, we need to make sure we get our act together. And I almost feel it's going to be something where something very bad is going to happen, almost like a 9/11 or like the COVID. And I know this may sound crazy, me talking like this, but I think in order to get people to shift their mindset and to start taking this seriously, something is gonna have to happen. Right now, if there's a ransomware attack on a hospital, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. There could be lots of people that wind up dying because the database is frozen. Maybe somebody was just about to go into surgery. Maybe somebody needs some medication, but they don't know if they, is this going to mix with one of their other medications. So there's a lot of serious things that can happen with some of these cyber attacks. If a municipality was taken over and the 911 system goes down, or the stoplights don't work in a city, those are things that would wreak havoc. It really, really would. And I do think, sadly, that this is going to be a long road, but it's going to be flat, and then it's just going to spike up when everybody finally wakes up and realizes that we all need to.
Yeah, and you're right. We've already seen some of the impact. So the oil pipeline, for example. So there were a couple of states that there were shortages in the in the gas station. So that has a direct impact. Do you feel that the government should do more from regulatory perspective to enforce more security awareness training, or is it still up to the business owners to go ahead and make that happen?
Well, right now, the Department of Defense is now requiring a new level of cybersecurity. It's called CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And that's going to be for all of their government contractors. And that's going on now. They're slowly rolling it out between now and 2025. And then I'm sure it's going to roll over to Homeland Security and, that kind of thing. But I think everybody is giving everybody too much credit for what they think is already going on. And for example, the Department of Defense, a lot of these contractors have been self-assessing that they are hitting a certain level of
Dana, what's wrong with self-assessment?
Yeah, exactly. Check the box. Yep, we're doing that. So they've been doing that, and under the framework of NIST 800-171. And so CMMC is a little bit more. So the Department of Defense is saying, well, we're really not upping the ante that much because everybody is doing this already. And they're not. And number one. And number two, they're sending in an assessor, a third-party assessor, who is going to determine whether or not you're doing this. So the self-assessment is out the window. And to make matters worse, it's pass or fail. So the government is definitely starting to, realize that this is something we have to take seriously. We're putting our foot down, and we're going to demand that this is going to happen. As far as them rolling over into demands for the private sector, I think they're probably just focusing more on what's going on within their government. But for example, Connecticut, which is where I am, they just passed a law in July that's going into effect October, where if you're a business, any kind of business in Connecticut, and you follow any one of these frameworks, there's a couple of different ones. There's a critical infrastructure framework. There's that NIST 800-171. There's a couple of other ones too. If you follow one of those frameworks and put a plan in place within your organization, you really have to do this. It's not that hard. It's just too intimidating. That's what it is. But if you put a framework in and you show that we are making an effort to follow, cybersecurity plan, everybody's trained, everybody knows what to do if there's a situation. If you put that in place and you do have a cyber attack, you're not going to be held responsible. The government is not going to penalize you for having a data breach. Where if you stand here and you're doing nothing right now, that the fees and the fines alone are probably not going to help putting you out of business.
Yeah, it's there's kind of a legal term to it that you have to prove that you've done the due diligence to protect yourself. So that's part of that. What's amazing about the videos that you create, the ideas that you come out with are amazing. Like I've seen a couple. How do you get that material? Because it's some of the stuff is like you see this every day, and you kind of almost like you see an ad 10 times a day, but you don't pay attention. So some of the stuff that you cover, even in the short videos, is something that we either seen on the news or we kind of know about. But all of a sudden, because the light bulb goes off, it's like, ah, yeah, this makes total sense. How do you come up with the material? Because I mean, there's no lack of that, but it's some of it is kind of trivial when you don't think about it.
Well, a lot of the stuff it just pops into my crazy brain, I guess. and then
Well, that's good.
so I try to pick a topic, and then I try to figure out, okay, well, how could I break this down? Because that's what I always try to do, is break it down to the lowest level that you can communicate. Everyone's going to understand when I do a video. And then if I can, I try to add a little bit of humor, and I think the humor part of it helps people remember, what it is, or it helps, break it down even further. Like I have one video, it's not necessarily funny, but it's explaining synthetic identity. And so I have my daughter's American Girl dolls here, right? And I explain how synthetic identity, happens with, a credit card application. And I have these four little beauties here with their social security numbers. And I show the way that it happens, and that this can go uncovered for years and years and years. And people don't realize that this is a big risk that we need to start watching out for.
You're 100% correct. It's there's so much of that it's that people can relate to, because if they can take something that's detached, oh, it's not going to happen to me, to something that I can relate to. It makes, and stories is something that always sticks with people.
Yeah.
And people do some trivial stuff that, like, the poster, like social security number, the birth date everywhere. They don't understand the birth date attached to your name is really what the whole criminal record database is attached to. Even though it sounds like a trivial thing, and anybody is congratulate you on your birthday on Facebook, even though that's like, okay, well, now I know your birthday as well. So from your perspective, where do you see things are going? We eventually, people are going to become more aware, but we're not there yet now. What about the kind of the younger generation, like the way schools are teaching cybersecurity or cybersecurity awareness to kids? Do you promote that, and potentially with your kids?
Yes, and I think that they should be talking about this at a very young age in the schools. The cybersecurity, and also, the cyberbullying that's going on is ridiculous right now. And the big difference is that we didn't grow up with all these devices that these kids have, and they have these devices. They're connected 24/7 to everybody that they've ever met, and lots of people that they don't even know. And they're sharing, oversharing, sharing every ounce of information about them. And they don't realize that, that's what an identity thief is going to do. They're going to start gathering all this little bits of information. And one thing I do say about, like the Facebook quizzes that people do, sometimes those are put together by identity thieves. And people think I'm off my rocker when I say that. But I had an interview the other day with a hacker. He was a bad hacker gone good. And he said just the same thing. And I said, well, I'm so happy you're saying this, because everybody's like, oh, yeah, sure, Dana, identity thieves are making these quizzes up. But they really are. So anyway, but to go back to, yes, there should definitely be cybersecurity training in the school, and we should definitely be talking to our kids about what's going on online. And the bullying thing, I always say to everybody that the earlier we can start talking to kids about this, and you say, listen, everybody at some time in their life, every single person is going to be bullied, and it's a terrible feeling. It's horrible. And when it happens, you're going to feel bad. If you ever want to talk to me, you can. And so at least just by planting that seed, they know that it happens to everybody. I'm not just this loser that they're picking out of the crowd, and that you're going to feel terrible about it. But then also talking about them not focusing everything on the number of likes that they get, the number of positive comments that they get on a post. These kids are, everything's got a filter on it. Everything is, and they only show them in the best light. Everything is fantastic. They're on vacation. They're
Yeah,
here.
it's like the Lego movie. Everything is wonderful.
Yes, exactly. And they take posts down if they get a couple of, not enough likes, or stuff like that. And I think that's terrible. So they can't base their whole self-esteem on the likes and the comments, is my point. Because if that's what's going to lift them up, as soon as they get a couple of negative comments, it completely deflates them. One negative comment is probably worth 10,000, positive likes. So they carry the same weight. So if they don't get hung up on either one, then they can just stay in the middle of the lane, post what they want to post, and not be worrying about who's liking it and who's going to say something nasty.
And then I am always very thankful that I grew up without without smartphones, because some of the stuff you just don't want to be out there, filmed, and this is something that kids don't even realize that you're adolescent or whatever, and you post a video online, and then it never really goes away, and it can haunt you years and years later, maybe when you're looking for a job, applying for background check, whatever the case may be. So we should all be thankful that we don't have that necessarily. So this is an ongoing topic. Basically, what would you recommend for someone who wants to continue kind of pursuing security awareness, but maybe on their own? Aside from your videos, of course, but what other resources do you like for people to get smart on cybersecurity awareness, and again, take that and then spread the word with their family members, coworkers, and so on?
Well, I think it's going to be dependent upon what kind of training is offered by the employers. That's pretty much where it's going to start, I guess, for the adults, because I can't see many adults saying, what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go out and I'm going to learn about cybersecurity. So,
why not then? It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah,
especially if it's fun.
It is, but I think I'm sometimes on an island there. But but I do think, and one thing I wanted to say too, because I thought you were going to talk about people looking to get into cybersecurity.
Yeah.
That is a huge opportunity for young people right now, because there are so many cybersecurity positions that are available now, and it's only going to completely blow up. And again, I'm not a technical person. There's going to be lots of roles that are going to be developing. I talk about this role, the BISO, the Business Information Security Officer, who's going to be helping communicate the information from the CISO, right, the Chief Information Security Officer, to the employees, because right now that's where the message is getting lost. The techie people that are the CISOs, they can't speak the same language as the regular employees. So we almost need someone that's going to help translate and bring the information down, track who's doing the training, make sure this is part of the culture within an organization. So young people, that's something to think about if you're thinking about getting involved with cybersecurity, but you're intimidated because you don't have the technical background.
I completely agree. I think a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. You're not aware that you don't require a technical background to you can it can even be a cybersecurity awareness trainer. Just like yourself. I mean, we need a village. It's more than one. You can not possible cover the entire country with all the tens of thousands of companies out there. And I was about to cover that as well. So, but it seems like the biggest hurdle right now is for especially young people when they go to school and they can't have that kind of the first break, because companies they want the intermediary roles, and the ones with extensive experience, but not necessarily the ones with like an entry level. So, in your opinion, you got started without a background, and you made it because you did like XYZ. Maybe you can provide some insight to how to break in if you're not necessarily have the experience to begin with.
Well, I think one thing that businesses are going to be considering moving forward, because it's going to be very expensive to just hire somebody to have them in the organization that their main job is going to be cybersecurity, this new additional $70,000 position, $80,000, whatever it's going to be. So instead of them doing that, what they could do is they could find somebody within the organization, right? And then have them trained to be this new BISO that I talk about. Then they could get a little bit more money, have a little extra responsibility, and then the company would still be benefiting from having somebody in charge of their cybersecurity program. But at the same time, it's not the expense of having somebody, that's there all the time doing that. So I think that's going to be kind of how people can get into it. There's lots of little courses out there that you can take to start educating yourself. That's how I started looking around, saying, well, how am I going to learn about this? And I went, took a couple of different courses, different places. And then if you kind of find out, where you're more comfortable going towards. So there's that whole area. And I think that the non-technical part of it is where they need to have the confidence to say, okay, I can work in the office, I can work in sales, I can work in wherever. Because, a lot of companies across the country are smaller companies that people are working at. So they play a lot of different roles within the organization. So this role, could be pretty much not anybody, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is the backbone of the economy. I mean, we know that the SMBs are not, they're the majority. The large companies you see, they're the minority of the economy, not the majority. And there's always roles. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you, either for advice, potentially services? You're prolific on LinkedIn, of course, but is there, preferred way for people to reach out?
Well, you can always find me on LinkedIn. If you want to drop me an email, you can drop me an email at dana@123cmmc, and I will get back to you that way. But I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So if you want to just send me a connection request, I'd be more than happy to accept it.
Awesome. And I'd like to kind of finish off with saying that the sky's not falling, and there's always some like green shoots. That we're making advances in cybersecurity. What are your thoughts about that? We're emerging from one of the worst pandemics we had, and which kind of, by the way, made your business more productive. What do you see as things are getting better from a cybersecurity perspective or otherwise?
Well, I do think that ransomware attacks that attack our critical infrastructure, like for example, the Colonial Pipeline, the meat plant, JBL Meats that got attacked, the hospitals that are getting attacked. These are things that people can relate to. They could say, I had to wait in line for gas. The price of meat went up. And I think that the more closer to home that people can really understand, like, oh, this is a serious thing. We need to start paying attention to it. I think that is starting to happen. They're starting to realize that. But I still think this is going to be a long, slow road. And that's okay. That's okay. It's like, there's a lot of new industries when they're first emerging that it's this long, low road. And but I do think that it's going to be something that eventually is going to be taken seriously, and you just have to keep the faith. Definitely have to keep the faith because it's not going away.
Dana, thank you very much for joining, and I highly recommend anybody who has not checked the videos and the awareness training that Dana provides for free on LinkedIn and some of these videos. It's really great. It's really entertaining. But it does, deliver the message across. So highly recommend to follow Dana. Anybody who's watching this right now and part of the community. So thanks again, and looking forward to potentially hosting you in person. You're a neighbor, so maybe we'll get together in New York City, one of the in-person events that are coming up.
That'd be great.
Thanks all for joining, and thanks again, Dana. Much appreciated.
Thank you.